You know what gets me every single year? I'll spend 3 months tending a 10x10 bed and I'm pulling maybe 30 pounds of tomatoes. Meanwhile, the Amish farmer down the road is pulling 200 from half that space and barely touching it. For years, I was doing what everyone does, cramming plants close together, fighting pests with sprays, tilling the same exhausted beds every spring. It worked, until it didn't. Then I spent time in Lancaster County and I noticed something weird. Their plants are spaced differently. The soil is darker, richer. And here's the thing, zero pest damage, not less. Zero. I realized they're not fighting nature, they're working with it. They're not spraying pests, they're preventing the conditions that cause pests. Everything is intentional, systematic. Today, I'm going to show you exactly what I learned and how to apply it to your small garden. I'll walk you through the spacing strategy that eliminates pests without chemicals, how to pull 200 tomatoes from 10 square feet, and how to build soil that improves every season. Stick around to the end because I'll share the exact transplant protection technique, the planting hole recipe that changed everything, and a straw-based method using nothing but organic materials. In Amish communities, there's a guiding principle often described as stewardship, the belief that the land isn't something to be conquered, but something to be cared for and improved for future generations. Now, I'm not here to preach theology, but here's why this matters for your garden. When we constantly till the soil, grow the same crop in the same spot year after year, or rely on quick fixes to solve every problem, we're often disrupting the very systems that make gardens productive in the first place. Amish figured this out through generations of observation, and what modern soil science is now confirming is that healthy soil functions like a living ecosystem. Researchers have found that soils rich in organic matter, beneficial microbes, and fungal networks are better at retaining water, cycling nutrients, and supporting stronger plant growth. Here's how it works at a biological level. Beneath the surface of your garden, beneficial fungi known as mycorrhizae form partnerships with plant roots. These fungal networks extend far beyond the root zone, helping plants access water and nutrients they couldn't reach on their own. In exchange, the plants provide the fungi with sugars produced through photosynthesis. It's a system that's been working in nature for hundreds of millions of years. At the same time, beneficial bacteria break down organic materials like compost, straw, and plant residues. As they do, they release nutrients in forms that vegetables can actually use. The result is healthier plants, stronger root systems, and higher yields from the same amount of space. That's Amish thinking applied to gardening. Amish growers don't have access to some secret fertilizer or miracle seed. They use the same sunlight, the same rain, and the same basic gardening tools available to everyone else. They're simply choosing to build the system instead of fighting against it. That's where the small space garden system we're discussing today begins. Before you can grow 200 tomatoes in just 10 square feet, you have to stop thinking about individual plants and start thinking about creating an environment where every plant can perform at its highest potential. That shift in thinking changed everything for me, and it didn't require buying a single product. It simply required working with the system that nature already designed. Here's step 1, and this is where the Amish approach starts to look very different from the usual backyard method. Of us plant tomatoes wherever there is space and hope they'll figure it out. But that usually creates crowding, weak airflow, and wasted ground. The Amish-style system handles it differently by making every square foot work on purpose. Mark out a 10-square-foot bed clearly. Fill it with rich, loose soil mixed with compost and organic matter. Shape the bed so water drains well and the roots can spread fast. Close-up of the bed being measured wide shot of the full 10-square-foot area before and after of bare ground versus prepared bed. Now, here's where most people go wrong. They cram plants into poor soil. If you do that, the tomatoes fight for nutrients and stay small. Instead, build the soil first. You'll know this is working when the bed looks dark, soft, and evenly packed with organic matter. Here's the recipe that changed everything for me. When you're ready to plant, dig a hole 8-10 inches deep. Fill the bottom half with aged compost mixed 50-50 with your native soil. This creates a nutrient-rich zone where the roots establish fast. Add a handful of perlite or coarse sand to keep it loose. Roots need both food and air. Does this matter? Deep planting encourages the tomato stem to develop lateral roots all the way up the buried section. That gives you a stronger root system right from the start, which means less transplant shock and faster establishment. Once your transplant is in, add 3-4 inches of clean straw around the base. Not hay straw. Hay has seeds, straw doesn't. Here's why this works. Straw holds moisture in the soil, prevents soil splash onto leaves, which spreads disease, and as it breaks down over the season, it feeds the soil with organic matter. By the end of the season, that straw has become part of your soil ecosystem. Next year, your bed is even richer. To recap, measure the bed first, build the soil deep, use the planting hole recipe, add straw mulch, then you're ready to plant. Once the bed is ready, you move to step 2, where the real productivity starts. Most gardeners let tomatoes sprawl on the ground, but that wastes space, increases disease, and makes harvesting harder. The Amish-style method uses height instead of width. Install strong stakes, cages, or a trellis before planting. Make sure the support is tall enough for mature vines, 6-8 feet minimum for indeterminate varieties. Space the supports so each plant can climb without tangling. Hands-on close-up of stakes going into the soil-wide shot showing the support layout before-after of plants on the ground versus trained upward. If you wait until the plants are big, you can damage the roots. Set the support first, not later. You'll know this is working when the support looks solid and ready before a single plant goes in. To recap, build upward support first, then plant into that finished structure. Once the support is in place, step 3 is where the spacing really matters. People plant too close or too random. That leads to tangled vines, poor airflow, and fewer tomatoes. The Amish system spaces each plant with purpose. Plant each vertical column 2 feet apart to ensure airflow and access between plants. Bury the stem 8-10 inches deep, leaving 4-6 inches above soil. Water thoroughly right after planting. Close-up of the transplant going into the whole wide shot showing the spacing pattern before-after of a crowded bed versus a clean row block layout. Now, here's where most people go wrong. They plant for the look of fullness instead of the needs of the plant. If you squeeze them too tight, disease moves fast. Instead, give each plant room to breathe. You'll know this is working when the plants stand upright, settle in fast, and start pushing new growth. Here's the math so you understand the claim. A well-trained, indeterminate plant produces 40 to 60 full-size tomatoes per season. Plant 4 of these vertical columns in your 10 square feet, and you're looking at 160 to 240 individual fruits, depending on variety and growing conditions. That's what 200 tomatoes translates to, roughly 80 pounds of production from a footprint smaller than a garden bed. To recap, space for airflow 2 feet apart, plant deep 8-10 inches, water immediately. Once the plants are established, step 4 is what keeps the harvest going. Most gardeners let every side shoot grow. That creates a jungle instead of a crop. The Amish-style method directs energy into fewer, stronger fruiting vines. Weak lower growth. Keep the plant trained upright. Trim only what blocks airflow or steals energy from fruit production. Hands-on close-up of pruning wide shot of a trained row of tomatoes before-after of messy growth versus clean fruiting structure. If you ignore pruning completely, the plant spends energy on leaves instead of tomatoes. Instead, guide the plant so it grows tall, clean, and productive. You'll know this is working when the plant looks open underneath and fruit clusters become easier to see. To recap, keep the plant trained, remove clutter, and protect the main growing stems. Once the plant is trained, step 5 is what keeps the whole system producing all season. People water when they remember and fertilize when the plants already look weak. The Amish approach stays ahead of the plant's needs so growth never stalls. Water deeply and regularly, consistent moisture, not feast and famine. Add compost or organic feed on a 2-3 week schedule, not reactive, preventive. Harvest ripe tomatoes often so the plant keeps producing. Close-up of watering at the base-wide shot of the full bed during maintenance before-after of neglected vines versus a thriving harvest bed. Now, here's where most people go wrong. They let the plant dry out, then flood it later. That stresses the roots and slows fruiting. Instead, keep the moisture steady. You'll know this is working when new flowers keep forming and ripe tomatoes keep coming in waves. To recap, steady water, steady feeding, steady harvest. Once this rhythm is in place, the whole 10-square-foot system starts acting like a much larger garden. Me share some patterns I've noticed over the years. These are the shifts in thinking that separate Amish high-yield gardens from conventional backyard gardens. The first pattern is treating tomatoes like sprawling plants that need more and more ground space. Most of us give every tomato plant a huge section of the garden and let branches spread wherever they want. Here's the problem. The plant spends energy supporting extra growth while taking up valuable square footage that could be producing food. Amish approach trains tomatoes vertically from the very beginning using strong stakes, trellises, or support systems designed to maximize height. What that means practically, instead of one tomato plant consuming several square feet, you can fit multiple productive plants into the same footprint while improving airflow and sunlight exposure. The second pattern is planting the entire garden on one weekend and hopping for continuous harvests. Most of us sow all our tomatoes, lettuce, beans, and other vegetables at the same time. Here's the problem. Everything matures together, harvests peak at once, and large sections of the garden become underutilized later in the season. Amish approach treats planting as an ongoing process. Start seedlings in waves, plant the first batch in spring, then plant a new round every 3-4 weeks until midsummer. What that means practically, while one crop is producing, another is getting established. The same square foot of soil produces multiple harvest cycles instead of just one. A garden that's done by mid-August keeps producing through fall. The third pattern is following generous spacing recommendations without considering the quality of the soil. Most of us assume more distance automatically means healthier plants. Here's the problem. Sunlight hits bare soil, moisture evaporates faster, and a surprising amount of growing space goes unused. Amish approach focuses on building soil fertility high enough to support intensive planting. Rich soil means plants can grow closer together without competing as heavily for nutrients. What that means practically, healthy soil allows tighter spacing without stress, giving you significantly more production per square foot. The fourth pattern is focusing entirely on fertilizer schedules. Most of us think about what to feed the tomato plant this week. Here's the problem. Every season starts with rebuilding fertility from scratch. You're always playing catch-up. Amish approach concentrates on creating rich soil that gets better year after year through compost, manure, cover crops, and organic matter. Fertility builds instead of depletes. What that means practically, stronger roots, better moisture retention, healthier plants, and larger harvests from the same garden space year after year. The fifth pattern is assigning each area of the garden a single purpose. Most of us grow tomatoes in one bed, herbs in another, and companion plants somewhere else. Here's the problem. Every square foot is doing only one job. Amish approach stacks functions whenever possible. Tomatoes grow vertically, basil fills the lower layer, flowers attract pollinators, and mulch protects the soil, all within the same footprint. One space produces multiple benefits simultaneously. What that means practically, more food, more pollinator habitat, more soil improvement from the exact same area. None of these shifts will ruin your garden. They're just leaving production on the table. Adding vertical growing, succession planting, and intensive soil building to what you already know can dramatically increase your harvest from the same amount of space. That's how a tiny garden starts producing results that look impossible on paper. Before I learned this system, I got around 30 tomatoes per plant. I used a huge amount of garden space. Half my fruit rotted on the ground, and my soil stayed depleted. Then I spent some time around experienced market gardeners, and I saw something that completely reset my thinking. One gardener had these vertical stakes and cages with deeply enriched soil columns. When harvest time came, he kept harvesting ripe tomatoes week after week from a single tall column. I stood there watching and counting, and I stopped counting after dozens upon dozens of full-sized fruits coming from that one vertical setup. That was the moment it clicked for me. The problem was never that tomatoes could not produce in a small space. The problem was the way most of us grow them. I get around 40 full-sized, fully ripe tomatoes on a single vertical column. I can yield about 80 pounds from 4 square feet, and my soil improves every year instead of collapsing. Here's how that progression looks over a single season. Weeks 1-2. The shoots emerge, the first flowers begin to appear, and you can see the green growth pushing upward through the soil. Month 1. The plant reaches about 12 inches, the fruit starts to swell, and the multiplication process becomes visible. Month 3. The first harvests arrive, the transformation is obvious, and the whole system starts to feel stable. End of season. You see the complete yield picture, along with the long-term results that come from building the system the right way. Me be straight with you about yield expectations, because I think honesty matters more than hype. The title says 200 tomatoes, and that is achievable. One well-pruned indeterminate plant on a vertical stake in deeply enriched soil can produce 40 to 60 or more tomatoes. 4 plants in 10 square feet can give you 200 or more total. My personal track record. My first year I pulled about 45 pounds. My best year was about 80 pounds. Seasoned gardeners I know consistently hit 100 plus pounds, but that's after decades of built-up soil, discipline with pruning, and a multi-year investment in the system. Realistic first-year expectation is 40 to 50 pounds from a single 4 square foot vertical setup. That is still an extraordinary yield for the space. Improve your technique each year and those numbers climb. I would rather you start with honest expectations and be pleasantly surprised than set yourself up for disappointment. Variables that affect your success include variety. Indeterminate types are preferred for yield, they keep growing all season. Watering consistency. Irregular watering tanks yields fast. Compost quality. Richer soil equals more production. Sunlight. Your tower needs 6-8 hours of direct sun minimum. Growing season length. Longer seasons give more harvests. That is the real lesson behind the Amish small space garden system. It is not about cramming more plants into less space. It is about building a system that lets every plant produce at its highest level. If any of these Amish growing methods changed how you think about maximizing a small garden, or if you're tired of feeling like you need a bigger yard to grow more food, I'd really encourage you to check out the small space gardening playlist linked below. It walks through some of the exact systems that help gardeners produce surprisingly large harvests from very limited space. If you want more deep dives into traditional growing methods, high-yield gardening systems, and practical strategies for producing more food in less space, hit subscribe. I post new videos every week focused on helping everyday gardeners get bigger harvests without needing a bigger garden. Here's what I really want to know from you. What's the biggest challenge you're facing with growing tomatoes in a small space? Is it low yields, disease problems, lack of room, or something else entirely? Leave it in the comments below. I read every single one and love hearing what's actually happening in your gardens. If this video changed how you think about what's possible in a small garden, please share it with someone who thinks they don't have enough space to grow their own food. Sometimes the difference between a few tomatoes and hundreds isn't more land, it's a better system. Thanks for spending some time with me today, and I'll see you in the next one.